October 7th, 2015 was a day I'll never forget. It's a day that changed my life. I was driving in my car, minding my own business from Gush Etzion to Jerusalem, and I decided to take the road from Tekoa, one of the back roads, because there was traffic. It was the first rain of the season, and lo and behold, as I passed two cars who were kind of on the shoulder of the road, kind of in the middle of the road, I didn't know what was going on. I thought maybe they were changing a tire. I slowed down to pass these two cars, and I looked to my right, and I saw what I hope none of you here or in the audience at home ever have to see: 40 masked Muslims, jihadists, running at full speed towards my car, carrying cement blocks and bricks and stones, and they were going to murder me. They were going to kill me, no doubt about it. And as they got closer, 40 meters, 30 meters, you really have about 5 seconds or so to decide what you're going to do. Are you going to hit the gas and try to get out of there? And in that split second, I decided if I press on the gas, they're going to hit me. They're going to reach my car. I don't have enough time. So thank God I do carry a gun. I am armed, use it for safety and security and protection. And I held my gun up to show them I was armed. At this point, I was at a complete stop, but they kept coming. So 20 meters, 10 meters, they're about to surround my car. And I opened the door, the driver's side door, and I fired one round in the air, and they all fled back towards their village. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but a woman just several minutes before had passed that exact point, and they actually surrounded her car and tried to drag her out and murder her. So she was covered in blood. I didn't know any of this till later on. Thank God a miracle happened. She survived, and she got out there. So why am I sharing you this life-changing story? Not just to eat up my clock here. If you remember the time period, and I think that time period still exists, 2015, or it could be 2002, or it could be 1929. It doesn't matter, really. What essentially was going on is you had a blood libel taking place. You had incitement being carried out. And in this case, it was the lie that Jews were desecrating the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We had it here just last week in regard to Hebron. We were told by the Palestinian Authority the Jews are damaging the holy sites in Hebron, and therefore they're going to UNESCO to try to declare Hebron, where our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried, as a Muslim-only holy site. You had this so-called stabbing intifada taking place. Again, this was a blood libel, accusing Jews of desecrating Al-Aqsa Mosque. So how did that message get spread? The message got spread through the media. If you remember 2002, that famous picture in the New York Times of what was actually a Druze policeman protecting a 17-year-old yeshiva student, the cover, front page of the New York Times said, no, this was an Israeli soldier beating up a Palestinian kid. So the media in that case was used to further the blood libel. And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, time and time again here in Israel. The delegitimization of Jews, the delegitimization of Israel, and in particular, residents of Judea and Samaria, the settlers, as they call us, residents of this area, the Shomron, Judea. We hear these terms being thrown around all the time: the settlers, occupation, and really, again, this is just a way, and we see this, all over the place, of trying to equate peace-loving residents of certain areas in Israel to Hamas. I've seen this before. Or recently I saw the comparison being made of the national religious camp here in Israel to Hezbollah. Like we are on the same level, those terrorists who seek our destruction. So we have this phenomenon. It's been going on for 50 years, and nothing really has changed in terms of the hate spewed against us. There have been some initiatives, which I've seen in recent years, that have come out in order to combat this. I can speak of one in particular. I remember when I was the official spokesperson for the communities of Judea and Samaria, the Yesha Council. I was their English Dover spokesperson. Back in 2004, we did one of the first ever wine tours of Judea and Samaria. We led the top journalists, foreign press here in Israel, the Associated Press, and some of the other big names, LA Times. And the first thing we did at 10 o'clock in the morning is we took them to a winery. And after they had a few glasses of wine and were happy, strolling through the hilltops of Judea and Samaria, I kid you not, the coverage actually was decent. When the articles came out the next day and the week afterwards describing the experience, the coverage was, I would say, fair and balanced, not to take from Fox News, but it was fair. At least they got our side of the story about what regular life is in Judea and Samaria, how a man in Ophrah in the Tanya winery is just trying to get by and make a living and grow grapes and produce this beautiful wine. So there have been some improvements. My main message here for you today is, regardless of what the press says, and I'm talking about mainly, the foreign press, that's my experience is working with the foreign press. In order to create change, it has to start at home. It has to start here at home. And I'm talking about top down. I'm talking about from our government officials, from our leadership. They have to say once and for all, in order to create this change, and I believe this, they have to say unapologetically, Judea and Samaria are part of the land of Israel. This is ours. First and foremost, they have to say that. And until that happens, we're really going to continue down this downward spiral of delegitimization against the settler people, the people of Judea and Samaria. The press here locally, unfortunately, there's a long way to go in a lot of camps. Where does the foreign press get their information? They did a survey, I believe, recently, and I think it's like 98% or 100% of the foreign press gets their news from one source in particular. I'm not here to call anybody out, but they get their news from them. The same organization that describes me as a resident of Judea and Samaria as being Hamas or being Hezbollah, or admitting after the pullout, the eviction of 10,000 Jews and their bodies, those who were buried in Gush Katif, admitting this wasn't done for security, admitting from some of the columnists, admitted this was done to get back at the settlers. So unfortunately, that's where the foreign press is getting their information. When you have an English-speaking blogger, again, not calling anybody out, who says BDS against residents of Judea and Samaria is valid. BDS against Israel is not so good. Against Judea and Samaria, that's kosher. When you have that happening time and time again, what can you expect from the foreign press who shows up here in Israel and tries to get an understanding of the situation? And I'm not condoning a lot of the coverage here, but what I'm saying is, my bottom line is, it has to start at home. And until we are willing to say loudly and clearly from top down, from those government officials, from the politicians, from the residents, from the press who need to learn and don't even have the information, that we have a right to be here in Judea and Samaria. Until that happens, we're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. 50 years ago, this talk today is about 50 years since the liberation of Jerusalem, since the return to the historical areas in Judea and Samaria and the Golan and all these other areas. 50 years ago, the paratroopers were up on the Temple Mount, and the famous lines were uttered, Har Habayit Bi'adenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. And what happened just a few minutes later? They went down to the Kotel, those paratroopers. And again, not to disrespect, God forbid, them in any way, shape, or form, but after we were up there on Har Habayit, we went down to the Kotel. And I mean this both literally and figuratively, until we go back up to that Har Habayit. Again, literally, go back up, but also figuratively recognize our rights to not only the Temple Mount, but to Judea, Samaria, and all the other areas, and say it loudly and clearly. Until we do that, we will have the problems that we're having now with the foreign press, and unfortunately some of those here who seek to delegitimize the residents of Judea and Samaria time and time again. I thank you all for your time. And all the best. Thank you.